UN said today that around 300,000 Palestinians had been forced from the southern Gazan city of Rafah in the last week, adding emphatically at a post on X, "There is nowhere safe to go." Earlier this week, the Israeli army seized the Gazan side of the Rafah crossing with Egypt, and President Biden threatened to halt weapons aid to Israel if they launch an all-out attack on the city. So what are the prospects for a ceasefire, and how do Israelis feel about the current state of the assault on Hamas? Joining me now is Tzipi Livni, who has served Israel as foreign minister and vice prime minister. Welcome, Tzipi. Let me ask you to begin with. The Biden team says Israel does not need to do a major ground incursion into Rafah to secure its goals of destroying Hamas. Bibi Netanyahu and his cabinet disagree. Who do you think is right?
Well, I'm not sitting now in the cabinet, and I don't want to be, a balcony advisor to the Israeli government, but it looks like there was not only majority, but all of the ministers decided it is necessary. But I believe that this is a matter of tactic, as long as we all agree about the goals of the war, meaning eradication of Hamas, topple the regime of Hamas, and release of the hostages. So I do hope that these tactical questions will be solved between Israel and President Biden. And the most important thing that is missing right now is not the question of what the Israeli forces will do directly in Rafah, outside of Rafah, or other cities in Gaza, but the real question is, okay, and then what? What's the end game? Who's going to replace Hamas in Gaza? Because topple the regime is important, but you cannot just topple the regime without replacing it. And this is a question which is in dispute between the Israeli government, between Netanyahu and Biden. And I do believe that this is the master key for different issues that are now on the table.
Let me ask you how you reacted when you saw some of the members of the Israeli cabinet really mock President Biden. One of them tweeted a line that was Hamas loves Biden after the Biden administration threatened to pause aid. This is an administration, Joe Biden's, that has provided Israel with massive amounts of support. The president came directly into the war zone. The United States has provided tens of billions of dollars worth of military aid to Israel in this. And the Israeli government on this one, given this one disagreement, has pushed back, or some members of the cabinet have pushed back against Biden very hard.
Yeah. I completely agree that the support that President Biden showed since October 7th is impressive. It's not just showing empathy to the victims of these horrors, but really create a deterrence that prevented deterioration into a regional war, the supply of weapons. And listening to some of the Israeli ministers, it's completely unacceptable. Now, it's not a secret that I'm a long-time opponent of Prime Minister Netanyahu, and I completely disagree and detest some of the ideology that this minister represents. So they are a damage not only to the Israeli-US relationship, but it's a damage to Israel itself from different aspects, and this is only one of it.
You mentioned that the key issue is what replaces Hamas. What do you think should replace Hamas? People talk about the Palestinian Authority. People talk about some coalition of Arab states like Saudi Arabia and Egypt. But who would provide security? That seems to me the key there, because Saudi Arabia is not going to want to have its troops be firing on Palestinian insurgents.
Well, it's clear that, and I'm not also thinking about just throwing the keys to the other side of the fence, hoping that somebody that is not a terrorist organization will catch the key and everything will be fine. In a way, we have the experience of the disengagement from Gaza, where we left, dismantled all the settlements, pulled out our forces, and Hamas took over. And therefore, there's a need to take it in terms of stages. Now, if we publish an ad on tomorrow's paper, wanted a regime for Gaza, I don't see many that will apply for the job. And therefore, since there are 2 million Palestinians there, there's a need for a Palestinian new regime. And the only, not perfect, but that can start doing it is the Palestinian Authority, after reforms that the United States is working with them. But yet, this is not enough, and there is a game changer. And this is the bigger plan, because there's a need, of course, for a release of the hostages with a ceasefire. During this time, hopefully, we can start working with the legitimate Palestinian Authority, which is not Hamas, and they are cooperating with Israel on Israel's security in the West Bank. So this can be also a basis and giving legitimacy to Israel to continue in acting against terror within Gaza until we have a regime that can act against terror. But the Saudis are really a game changer, because this can create not only a new reality in Gaza, but a new security structure in the region. And my criticism on the Israeli government right now is that they are not willing to deal with what we called since day one the day after, and the day after is here and now. And they are not willing to do so because some of these ministers are not just mocking the president or the United States, but also are not willing to deal with this, because for them, the Palestinian Authority is part of the problem. And Netanyahu succeeded in portraying the Palestinian Authority and Hamas as the same. So it's really a very complicated jigsaw, and there's a need for the US to orchestrate all the different parts of it. But there's a need also for Israel to start talking about who's going to replace Hamas as a regime, because otherwise all the other options are worse. Israel doesn't want to reoccupy Gaza. Maybe some of the ministers that do, but it's against our interest. Hamas cannot stay, and we all agree, not only in Israel, but also with the US, that there's a need to eradicate the regime. And there's a need for cooperation with Egypt on Philadelphia corridor, the border between Gaza Strip and Egypt. But there's a need to make this decision, because otherwise living a chaos will bring Hamas back. And this is what we see in some parts of Gaza Strip, where the Israeli forces already acted against Hamas, they pulled out, and now Hamas is back. And this is something that we really cannot afford. And of course, we need a civilian regime that will take care of the civilians from humanitarian perspective. Very complicated, but I believe that it's doable. And this can bring the change and turn this awful situation into maybe, hopefully, a new opportunity.
Tzipi Livni, thank you so much for that very interesting and wise set of remarks. Next on GPS, I will ask the former Palestinian Authority Foreign Minister Nasser al-Kidwa about his vision for peace and what role Palestinians could play in Gaza after the war. And now for another perspective on the war in Gaza and what comes next, I want to bring in Nasser al-Kidwa. He is a former foreign minister for the Palestinian Authority and represented the PLO at the UN. He is also the nephew of the late Yasser Arafat. Nasser, welcome. Let me ask you whether, from your perspective, the Biden administration's recent public distancing itself from Israel on the issue of Rafah and a full-scale ground operation there is welcome news. Do you think that it's been effective? How do you view what the Biden administration is doing right now?
Well, to be frank with you, I think the administration is saying the right thing. They say that we don't like what we see happening in Gaza. However, when it comes to action, it's a different story. So do I like it? Yes, I like it. Do I think that this was enough to change things and to change the course of event. Unfortunately not. And unless we see serious change, unless we see some clear positions taken, some actions taken, I think we'll stay in the same situation.
What do you think is going on in Gaza right now in terms of, is Hamas defeated? How would you that's been the Israeli goal. Do you think it's being achieved?
No, it was not achieved, and it's not going to be achieved. And that emphasizes the fact that what Mr. Netanyahu is doing now in Rafah is catastrophic. He is taking the situation to a new level, a new catastrophic level, criminal level, I would say, and without any specific results. Because he said the same thing before Khan Yunis. He said the same thing before even the city of Gaza, before attacking the Shifa hospital, and the result was the same. So this is a situation that cannot be solved by military means only. This is a situation that requires also some political consideration and some political understanding of the situation that then will take us all to ending this catastrophe and move forward, not only to solve the situation in Gaza, but to hopefully solve the overall political situation as well.
One has to assume that the population in Gaza is more radicalized now. I mean, given the trauma of the last few months, if you were to hold an election in Gaza tomorrow, am I wrong in thinking Hamas would probably do better than it would have done before?
I wouldn't agree with you, Farid, on this one. Because I think one of the results of the catastrophic situation now is the fact that the population feels hopeless, and they feel that the party who brought them here in this situation was at least partially Hamas, irrespective of the atrocities of the Israeli side. So I don't think so. Nevertheless, let me say also that unfortunately elections tomorrow is impossibility because of the fact, not the least of the existence or the presence of about 2 million displaced Palestinians. You cannot tell a displaced person, come and vote. You have to take care of his needs or her needs first and provide them with the necessary tools to survive, and then move forward and go for political solutions and change internally, democracy, including elections.
All right, stay with us. When we come back, I will ask Nasser Al-Kidwa what the day after looks like and what it should look like in his view. And we are back with the former Palestinian Authority Foreign Minister Nasser Al-Kidwa. Nasser, let's talk about the day after and what it would look like. You heard Tzipi Livni say Palestinian Authority should take over, but lots of people say in the United States, in Israel, frankly in the Palestinian territories as well, that the Palestinian Authority is corrupt, it's compromised, and particularly that Mahmoud Abbas, Abu Mazen, who heads it, is too old, too compromised a character. What do you think?
Well, I don't disagree with that, but let's talk about the day after in general. And here I think several very important things need to happen. One, first and foremost, this catastrophic war needs to end. I mean, this bloodletting, the agony of the population, the crazy ideas such as collective deportation and shrinking the territory of Gaza and things like that need to stop. And then we need to ensure that there is Israeli withdrawal, a withdrawal without return and without any attempt to impose conditions on the Palestinian people that the people don't accept, such as the siege, for instance. And then, of course, we need to reach a solution on an exchange of hostages and prisoners in a way that would end this drama in the right way. After that, here I agree again with you, what you said at the beginning, that we need to have a drastic and seriously reformed Palestinian Authority. Not the kind of gimmick that we saw with the current government, when Mr. Abbas brought that government. I mean, this did not change anything and cannot change anything. We need to change the system in general. We need to change the ability of Mr. Abbas to govern at will and to do whatever he wants through maybe an empowered government that can rebuild Gaza, which takes us to another thing that needs to happen. We need to have an effective government free from corruption and capable of rebuilding Gaza and prepare the situation, this part of the country, in addition to the West Bank, prepare it for elections after a while when the situation permits this kind, because after all, election is the only possible solution, real and drastic solution for all the ills of the Palestinian situation. And finally, we need to have a conference of donors that would provide for the financial assistance necessary to rebuild Gaza. Before that, I think we need also to have some kind of an Arab security presence that would provide for a temporary situation whereby it can take over from the Israelis and hand over to the Palestinian government, the new Palestinian government. I think this is something that the Arabs will be willing to consider if, number one, there is an Israeli commitment for full Israeli withdrawal from Gaza, and number two, if there is an Israeli commitment for a political solution that provides for the two states, Israel and Palestine, with the mutual recognition between the two of them by a certain date that is agreed upon.
So I don't have a lot of time, but I have to ask you, when you look at the mood in Israel today, it seems that they are intent on staying in Gaza to maintain some security presence. They've already created buffer zones. They're creating corridors to make it hard to move from North to South Gaza. When you ask people in Israel about a two-state solution, it seems to be at its lowest, at the lowest levels of support for it in decades. How would do you anticipate this changing? It seems difficult.
Well, it is difficult, but it will change. Once I read an article for an Israeli author who said that there will be a political solution not out of magnanimous attitude and enthusiasm, but out of desperation and the failure of both sides to annihilate the other side.
Let's, on that somewhat hopeful note, I will leave. Nasser Al-Kidwa, thank you so much. Pleasure to have you on. Next on GPS, Xi Jinping made a rare trip to Europe this week. What came out of that visit? And what did it have to do with China's competition with America? When we come back.